Hi, my name's Stuart Thompson, and welcome to my introduction to Git. You may have used source control systems in the past, perhaps you used TFS or Subversion, and you've heard about Git and would like to try it, but are looking for somewhere to start. In this introductory video, I'm going to look at downloading and installing the Git command line tools for Windows, creating our first repository, and exploring a few of the initial Git bash commands. So with that, let's get started. First of all, visit gitscm.com in order to download the Git tools. Again, I'm using Windows, so I'm going to click the Download for Windows button. I actually already have this downloaded to save us the time. And the file that you'll get is a Git 1.9.5 preview. You'll notice that's different than the latest source release of 2.4.2. The reason for this is that on Windows we're using a port of Git, which was originally written for Linux. And that port is something called msysgit that is up to version 1.9.5. But let's go ahead and install. So yes, we would like to install. That starts the setup wizard. I'm going to click next and then next again through the license information. And by default, Windows Explorer integration is checked. I uncheck that. I don't actually want Explorer integration. You may wish to. It adds a right-click menu that allows you to open the git bash command prompt in the current folder that you're viewing. For this tutorial, however, I'm going to leave that unchecked and the two associate file checkboxes checked, and then click Next. Then we get options to adjust our path environment. Here, use Git from Git bash only is the option I'm going to use. It's the safest if you're new to Git. It doesn't add any path variables or modify anything about the Windows command prompt. Finally, we're going to configure our line ending conversion rules. Git, of course, being a Linux tool, uses Linux line endings by default, LFs, as opposed to CRLFs. Windows and Unix environments use different line endings on files. The top option, check out Windows style and commit Unix style line endings, is suitable for almost all projects and is great for cross-platform development. What this says is when you check out code from a remote, all of the line endings will be converted to CRLF Windows-friendly line endings. But when you commit back to that remote, the Unix style line endings are used. That means that if you're collaborating with somebody working on a different operating system, they won't have problems with the line endings, and neither should you, as the conversion is happening both sides. So clicking Next will actually start the installation. I'm going to cancel this because I've already installed. And then I'm going to start the git bash command prompt that is installed once that setup wizard completes. Now, git bash is a set of command line tools that are packaged with that msysgit, that Git 1.9.5 preview that we downloaded. It contains everything that you need to work with Git on Windows, including some of the Linux bash tools that Git uses internally. So with this bash shell open, if it's unfamiliar to you, don't worry, we'll walk through all of the commands. Let's first change to our development directory. I use cstu-dev. So cd, change directory, cstu-dev will get us there, and we can see it confirmed to the right-hand side of the prompt. Now let's create a folder in which we can work. I'm going to call mine git intro, and we can see with an ls, list the contents, we have a git intro folder now in our bash shell. Let's cd to that git intro folder, and then just confirm ls-a says list all of the files in this directory, that this is in fact an empty directory. Great, we have somewhere to work, but it's not yet a Git repository. Git needs certain information to be provided in order for it to track files within a folder. So we make this a Git repository by typing git init. And really quick, I'm going to move a few windows around and open a new notepad file that tracks the commands that we're looking at today. So here we've seen so far git init initializes a new Git repository in the current folder. So here we can see Git said to us, initialized empty git repository in c stu dev git intro.git, and we can confirm in Windows Explorer that a .git folder, a hidden system folder, has appeared. This folder tracks everything Git needs to know about the repository, including objects, references, configurations, where the head pointer is, all the sort of things that a source control system needs to know in order to track changes to files. We can leave everything alone inside that folder, but the presence of it is what indicates this is a Git repository. So let's start by learning how to add files into our Git repository. The command we're going to look at is git add. Now this adds a file or files to the currently staged commit. And let's talk a little bit about how git commits work. In other source control systems, there is a one-stage commit process. You modify files in a directory and then say, check in my latest code to my current branch. Git splits that apart a little and has a two-stage process. And what I mean by this is if we imagine that we have a stage and then a commit and changes, we're going to stage files first. We're going to say will be committed files, and then finally we're going to have been committed files. So we're going to take changes, files that have been changed, move them into the stage that will be committed, and when we've added in a few files here, finally we'll commit those as a block. And the reasons why that is useful will become clear as we start to modify a couple of different files. For now, let's add our commands.txt that we've been working on into this Git repository. We do that with the command git add and then the name of the file we'd like to add. So Git doesn't really tell us anything. The file's been added, but we don't know that yet. So we're going to need another command before we proceed too much further. And that command is git status. Git status tells us about the status of our current branch in this repository. So asks about the current status of our branch. And if you're not familiar with branches, don't worry, we'll cover branching and merging and more advanced topics in later videos. For now, suffice to say that we are on a branch called master, and that we will be working within that master branch for the rest of this tutorial. So let's explore git status. On branch master, initial commit, changes to be committed, new file commands.txt. Interesting. So we're on the master branch, we knew that. We're creating our initial commit. Note that we haven't created it yet. And the changes we will commit are the new file commands.txt. Now this file is listed because we added it earlier. Let's go ahead and remove that file. Let's go ahead and unstage it. Here Git says use git rm ---- cached file, so remove the cached version of the file to unstage it. So git rm ---- cached commands.txt. That rm's commands.txt, but you notice it doesn't delete it from disk. Commands is still actually here. We can confirm that. But now when we look at status, we can see that commands is untracked. It's the opposite of add. We moved it out of the stage back into the untracked list. So let's add git rm ---- cached file to the list of commands that we've looked at today and say this removes a file from the currently staged commit. And we can do this back and forth a couple of times. Let's add commands.txt and check status. Oh look, it's changes to be committed, new file commands.txt. And let's remove it from the list of files that are to be committed and check status again, and it's now untracked. So we're just moving it back and forth between the untracked list and the staged list. We're moving it from untracked into staged and from staged into untracked. Now once we add it, confirm with status that it's to be committed, we could go ahead and commit. but we have to do one thing to a fresh repository, or a fresh installation of Git rather, before we can create our first commit. What we need to do is tell Git who we are. We do this with the commands git config -- global, this is a global setting, user.email stuart@stuartthompson.net. That's my email address. And then the second piece of information Git will need is our username. The reason Git needs this information is in order to track who the commits were created by when they're pushed up to other repositories. For now, if you're a little unfamiliar with this, just trust that these commands are necessary, and we'll cover them in more advanced topics. Okay, so we've configured a global setting called user.email and a global setting called user.name. Let's add that to our list of commands that we've looked at. Commands file up to our first time setup. And then we're going to do a second section called commands. Great. So we're going to look at git commit. We're going to look at git commit -m message. Now git commit can be called directly, and it will open a text editor that allows you to enter a commit message. If you know what message you'd like to enter, you can use the command line switch -m to shortcut that process and just enter the message directly. So here we say git commit my first commit. Git echoes back some information to us. We're going to break that down and look at it in a minute. For now, know that we've created our first commit, and we can add that to our list of commands. Creates a commit from the currently staged set of files. Great. Now one more command that we need before we can start interacting with this too much. Git log. Git log says, show me the history of commits for this repository. So let's add that to our list of commands. Shows the list history of commits. Great. So here we have a commit with a big, long, scary looking name. It was created by Stuart Thompson on Tuesday, June 2nd at about 8:45 at night with the message, my first commit. Let's clear, and let's go through a review of these commands and look really at what staging means, move some files back and forth, and then look at editing a file versus adding a new file. I always start with git status. Where am I? What is my current state? So I am on the branch master. I have nothing to commit, and my working directory is clean. A clean working directory simply means there are no new untracked files, and there are no modifications to tracked files. files that Git is watching. Let's change that. Let's add a new file. Let's say newfile.txt. We can edit it in Notepad and say, I'm a new file. Whee! I'll save it with Alt-F-S, Alt-F-X, for those of you who use keyboard shortcuts. And then let's do git status again and see, aha, on the branch master there is an untracked file called newfile.txt. Nothing has been added to the commit, but there are untracked files present. Use git add to track them. So let's do exactly what we did before. Say git add newfile.txt. Now we can, with status, see that there is a change to be committed called newfile.txt. And then finally, we can commit, adding a new file. So that's pretty much what we did with the commands.txt, except now with this new file.txt. We can run git status again and see we're in a clean working directory, and all is right with the world. We've been through the process of adding an untracked file to a stage, and then committing the stage set with a message. And finally, we can look at git log and see we had our first commit, and then about 2 minutes later, we had our second commit where we added a new file. Great. We know how to add files. We know how to query the status of the repository. We know how to remove a file from the staged commit, not remove it from disk. And then we know how to take the currently staged commit and realize it, make it real, and give it a message. Now let's look at one more command, which is git reset. Git reset head file. Now what is this used for? Well, let's save commands.txt, therefore changing it. We can confirm that it's changed with git status. Indeed, change is not staged for commit, the modified file commands.txt. Let's add that file, commands.txt, and query with status that we've added it. Now in this case, we have changes to be committed. We've built a stage, we haven't committed it yet, and the modified file commands.txt is in that stage. But the undo message from Git is a little different than before. It says use git reset head file to unstage. Now the reason this is different than the rm ---- cached is this isn't a new file that Git is tracking. This is a file that Git has been tracking that has now been modified. So there's a different command to remove it from the stage. We can test that command now. Let's git reset head commands.txt. Head is what's known as a pointer. It's the tip of our current branch, the latest point that we're working on. For now, let's just accept this command as is, and we'll look at tips and pointers and what head means in a later video. So for now, we run git reset head commands.txt, and we see there are unstaged changes after the reset, the modified file commands.txt. All that means is we've moved the staged file commands.txt back into the unstaged list. So we've reversed the process of git adding commands.txt by resetting it. So that's where we can see that these two commands, git rm ---- cached and git reset head, removes a tracked file from the currently staged commit. And I should edit this description to say removes an untracked file from the currently staged commit. Let's clear, and let's just do that one more time. So with status, we have one modified file called commands.txt. We add it to the current stage. We check the stage and see there is a change to be committed, a modified file called commands.txt, and then we reset that file and say, I didn't mean to stage that. Okay, it's now unstaged, and we run status and confirm that it's unstaged. Now, why is this useful? Why do we need this two-step process? Why can I not just change files and then commit? Well, let's modify newfile.txt again. Modifying this again. Clear our command line. Check status, see that two files are changed, and realize, oh, I changed both of those, but I only meant to create a commit for one of them. I don't want to create a single message that has both changes in it. I want to create two commits. one that describes the modification to commands.txt, and a separate commit that describes the changes to newfile.txt. That's where staging comes in useful. I can add newfile.txt to the stage. Sorry, not get newfile.txt, get add newfile.txt. I can confirm in status that new file will be committed, but commands will not. And then I can create a commit that says modifies the new file. Here, only one file was changed. It's called modifies the new file, and checking git status shows that commands.txt is still in a changed but uncommitted state. So now I can add commands.txt, commit that, updates commands.txt, and check status, see my working directory is clean. But now when I go to my log, I see my first commit, adding a new file, and then these two new commits that we created. One that modifies the new file, and one that updates commands.txt. By separately staging and committing those files, I was able to create two discrete atomic commits for each of the two separate changes that I made. So I think we're going to stop there. That's a good introduction. We've learned how to set up Git and configure who we are. First, we download and install the tools, and then we've looked through a set of commands. Git init to initialize a new repository, add to add an untracked or modified file, status to ask where we are right now, git rm cached and git reset head to unstage files, commit to take the current stage and create a commit from it, and log to see the history of commits that we've created. In our next videos, we'll dive in a bit deeper to some more commands, look at what head means, and then start working into branches and merges. So thank you very much for watching. Again, my name's Stuart Thompson, and I'll see you soon.